Hey, everybody, welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you're new. My name is Henry Bingaman, and this is the 24th episode of the podcast. So that's one episode a week for 24 weeks in a row. So it's about time to shake things up, don't you think? I announced this last week, but I'm now going to make it official. I'm changing the name of the podcast. So let me give you a little bit of a backstory for that. My first mentor in business was Mark Ford. Mark is known for building the billion-dollar Agora publishing empire along with Bill Bonner. He's also known for his philosophy of ready, fire, aim. He wrote a whole book about it in 2007 under his pen name, Michael Masterson. So to sum it up way less eloquently than Mark does in his books, that means in step one, ready, you do some basic prep work. You lay some foundations and prepare a minimum viable product. Then step two is fire. You put that product out in the world and get some eyeballs on it. Then after it's out in the world, if it gets some traction, you aim. That means you recalibrate, refine the product, and you zero in on it to make it a better and better product. So that's been my general philosophy for most of my business career, and it holds for this podcast as well. I did the ready part, I did the fire part, and that was launching with the title Getting Out of the Machine. And I was never a huge fan of that name, but it more or less conveyed the idea I wanted to get across. And I got some traction between YouTube, Apple, Spotify. I'm getting about 1,000 downloads per episode, which isn't bad. That's not quite at the level where, I'm changing the world or even making any money from it. But it's enough to tell me that some people at least are interested in what I'm doing. I didn't expect 100,000 listeners per episode. I'm not some celebrity or social media star. I'm just some dude that's done pretty well in business. And I really, really care about the cause of liberty. So now I'm at the aiming part. And that's why I'm renaming the podcast. So from now until the end of time, or, whenever I change my mind again, this podcast will be called Practical Liberty. There are a couple reasons for the change. First, I think Practical Liberty is just a better name. It's shorter, it's punchier, and it communicates what I'm trying to accomplish here better than Getting Out of the Machine. Now, I can geek out on the abstract conversations about how the world should work. I can argue for radical decentralization with the best of them, but that only gets you so far. I'm much more interested in the practical steps you can take on your own and in your own life to become more free. So if I had thought of this name earlier, I would have started the podcast. I would have started the podcast as Practical Liberty. But at the time, the conversations I was having were, what do you want to make the podcast about? And the statement that resonated most with most people was helping them get out of the monstrous machine that is modern society. So I just named the podcast Getting Out of the Machine. And I didn't know at the time if I'd get any traction. So I was just launching this thing out there into the universe. Luckily, as I said, it's going pretty well. So now's the time to aim. Plus, over the past 4 months, 5 months or so, I've been having conversations with a lot of very smart, liberty-minded people. And they've been really kind of helping me to formalize and refine my thinking around helping people get liberty. See, I'm just about as free as anyone can become in this society, which is pretty damn free. I've made millions of dollars. I can live anywhere in the world, but I choose my fully paid off 15-acre patch of dirt and trees up here in the mountains. I have a support network that I can tap into whenever I need it, and I can provide more or equal value to them. And generally, I do what I want to do. Now, don't get me wrong. On a philosophical level, I'm horrified by what's happening to the world right now. And I want to make the world a better place in as much as I can. But I also believe that the way I can help the best is by helping individual people, like you, for example, become as free as I am, as free as you want to be. Because if we're ever going to make an impact, if we're ever going to lead a real liberty movement, it has to come from people who are mostly outside the clutches of the ruling class. Now, here's the thing. We have the worst, most corrupt ruling class of my lifetime. But at the same time, we also have the most potential for freedom and prosperity and all the good things life has to offer than ever before in history. The problem is building a free life can look like eating an elephant. It's like, oh, all I have to do is make millions of dollars, buy property in multiple states, and build a network of wealthy and influential libertarians. Get right on that. Now, if that was the level of advice, I'd give up on it too, right? But don't worry, it's not that overwhelming. And you don't have to. In fact, you can't do it all at once. So I started breaking it all down into the different elements you need to be able to claim you're a free person and the different steps and the levels of achieving that. So in this episode, I want to lay out those basics. So first, my goal. The overarching thing that I want and basically have always wanted is more freedom and more liberty in my own life. And by extension, I want everyone to be able to maximize freedom and liberty in their lives. So right now, I'm getting pretty close to where I want to be. Through copywriting and marketing, I've been able to sell over $300 million worth of products for my clients. And I've managed to make, a lot of money for myself as well. I was averaging over $1 million a year for a few years before I walked away from all my copywriting clients. So I live in the exact location. I live in the exact house I want. I could get canceled and kicked off of most social media platforms or whatever. And well, I would find that extremely annoying. It wouldn't really have any effect on my lifestyle. But the process I took to get here was a lot more painful than I think it had to be. That's because, this whole process was basically me winging it. I knew my end goal, my liberty destination, I guess we can call it, but I didn't actually have any idea how to get here. I grew up in a city surrounded by poverty and not a negligible amount of violence. I wasn't born with a roadmap or mentors that could show me the way. So if you picture my goal as the mountain in the distance, my process was basically to try something out, then look up and see if I was closer to the mountain or further away. And a lot of times over the past 15 years or so, I'd look up and the mountain would be further away than I wanted it to be, further away than it used to be. So I wanted to figure out a systematic approach to liberty that I can walk people through so they can become strong, independent, and in a position to actually live their life on their own terms. Because if you want to fight for liberty, whether that's just for you or your family, for future generations, you have to do it from a position where you can't be instantly taken off the playing field when you get noticed. You can't do that from a corporate job that fires you for wrongthink. You can't do that when you literally work for the government. You can't do that when you're surrounded by only people who think through some undiscernible logic that letting people live their lives the way they want is somehow fascism. So I've been reverse engineering my own path to get here, and I'm still learning from a lot of people who know way more than I do. And that's what I want to share with you. But this podcast isn't for everyone. I'm not going to sit here every week and try to convince people to want freedom, right? So in that vein, there are three core truths that I think we should agree on if you're going to listen to this podcast. The first is that our ruling class is a breathtaking combination of incompetent and corrupt. If you think that our rulers are trying their best, even if they occasionally get things wrong, then I think you've been living with your head in the sand. And that's okay. You'll probably think I'm a wild conspiracy nut, right? And just to totally solidify that idea, I say our rulers, not just our politicians, because I believe the ruling class is not just our politicians, but also the bureaucratic state behind them, the corporate press, the universities, and a lot of the leaders of the mega corporations like pharmaceutical companies and big tech companies. They've formed an unspoken but very natural alliance against basically the rest of humanity. As Michael Malice says, they want you dead, but they'll settle for your submission. Now, if that sounds absolutely outrageous to you, then this isn't the podcast for you. Or maybe you're just not ready quite yet. Either way, it's not going to work out. So the second truth that we should agree on is the non-aggression principle. This is the very libertarian principle. It's the core of libertarian, but it seems, obviously right to me. The basic idea is that you can't initiate aggression towards anyone else, and nobody can initiate it towards you. Aggression is defined as the initiation of physical force, the threat of force or fraud against people or their property. So to say that another way, all transactions need to be made voluntarily by all parties involved. The only time it's acceptable to use force or violence is in self-defense. But even then, just rationally speaking, nonviolence is usually the better answer. That means I'm not now or ever calling for any kind of violent revolution to, take back our freedoms. Look, if you are somebody that cares deeply about liberty and you're mad at the government or anyone else for dramatically overstepping, I feel your pain, but I also think I have to warn you, anyone who's trying to recruit you to fight the government or blow stuff up, they're probably a Fed, right? You're not going to take down the government with force. It's stupid to try, and it's totally unnecessary. There's no doubt that the government is powerful, and if they target you, they can make your life miserable. But at the same time, you can live an extraordinarily free life in America and in most places around the world by simply arranging your life slightly differently than most people do. And that's one of the things I want to help you accomplish. All right, the third truth we need to agree on, if you're going to get anything out of this podcast, is this. Nobody owes you anything. This concept is hard for a lot of people to accept. You were born, your parents have some moral obligations to keep you alive for the first 18 years. Then even if you had the worst parents in the world, you're on your own. Your success or your failure from there is entirely your responsibility and your fault. Now, I realize this isn't fair. It's not even a little bit fair. Some people are literally born into royal families, and other people are born into the kind of crippling poverty that we can't even imagine. But the fact is that nobody owes you anything, and nobody is coming to save you. So if somebody gives you something, it's because there's something in it for them as well. That's true in 100% of the cases. Even if it's charity, they're doing it. If they're doing anything for you, it's because it makes them feel good. But in general, once you're an adult, you're responsible for your own well-being. And look, I know it's true that bad luck and malevolent people and bad circumstances can happen to anybody. Again, that is not fair, but the only way to have a good, successful, fulfilling life is to work for it and to build it yourself. So those are the three truths: that our rulers are incompetent and corrupt, that it's immoral to initiate force on anyone else, and that nobody owes you anything and nobody's coming to save you. Those are fundamental to what I believe. And if you can't agree with those, at least in broad strokes, then it's going to be hard for you to get much out of this podcast or anything else I put out, frankly. There's plenty of room for disagreement about the extent and significance of each, but if we can't agree on these basics, then you're probably going to hate everything else I have to say. So let's just save each other some headaches and part ways now. I'm only talking to people who actually want to create liberty for themselves and the people around them. And that leads me to the next question, which is, what does liberty actually look like? It's kind of an abstract term. It means to the maximum extent of your ability that nobody can tell you how to live your life. The only restriction on your freedom should be the non-aggression principle that we just talked about. You're not free to force anyone else to do anything. Of course, just because that's true, that nobody should try to force you to do anything, clearly doesn't mean that nobody's going to try to force you to do things. And to some extent, they're going to win. So, for example, I'm philosophically opposed to taxes, and I have a team of financial wizards who try to minimize the amount of taxes I pay. But I do pay taxes, because if I don't pay taxes, they can literally steal my house and lock me in a cage. Morally, I find that disgusting. And I pay more taxes than 95% of Americans. I pay more in taxes than a lot of people make in a year. But it's barely enough to cover the cost of a couple Hellfire missiles that our military drops hundreds of times every year all over the world. So how many innocent children have my tax dollars been used to kill? But whatever, I'm not volunteering to pay my taxes. I'm not volunteering to pay for those bombs. My tax dollars are basically extorted from me every year. And I would love to live in Ancapistan where every interaction is perfectly voluntary. But that's a utopian world. And the fact is, we don't know what problems would arise there either. So I'm not trying to change the entire world all at once. I'm just trying to maximize my freedom, then maximize the freedom for those around me. If that means the liberty movement gets one free state or even one free city, that's good enough for me. But back to the question. So how do I create liberty in my own life? Well, there are four main areas I believe you need to focus on. Four cornerstones to build from to create a free life. I've come up with a super clever acronym for this. I call it SWAN. So first is the S. That stands for security. If somebody can easily take all of your stuff or hurt you, then you're not really free, right? You can't be. There are some bad people in the world who want to hurt you and take your stuff. So it's your number one priority. Your number one responsibility in life is to protect yourself and your family. Now, under that security umbrella, there are a few different categories. Personal security is the obvious one. Can you defend yourself? That's pretty important. Digital privacy and security is another one. I did a podcast with Glenn Meter a few weeks ago that covered this pretty extensively. And he made the point that if you don't have privacy, you can't have freedom, which I totally agree with. And then if you have assets, you need to secure those as well. Hackers, governments, criminals, even just people that don't like you. If they can get your stuff, it can set back your level of independence in a big way. So let's move on to the W. That's wealth. There's a lot to this one. It's not just money in the bank, right? It's your income, your ability to earn money. It's your investments. It's knowing what assets to buy and when. Is it better to own gold or crypto or land or all three? Look, I'm not primarily a money-driven person. My main motivation is to be free, but money solves a lot of problems and can create a lot of freedom. So wealth is a huge area of freedom, and it's an area where a lot of people struggle. So that is obviously a major focus of this podcast and business to help you grow your wealth and build a stable mobile income. Then the A. The A stands for awareness. This is a huge piece of becoming and staying free. It's what some of my heroes have focused on. Mises, Rothbard, Hoppe are the old school libertarian thinkers. Without them, we wouldn't even really know what a free society or a free life could look like. So we owe them a debt of gratitude. And today we have people like Tom Woods, Dave Smith, Scott Horton, and a ton more spreading the word about liberty and keeping people aware of all the threats to their liberty. So that's great. And personally, I think it's equally important to understand at least some elements of evolutionary psychology and topics like that as well. If you don't know what actually motivates people, you can get sucked into a romantic view of the world that doesn't really match up with reality. So being aware of what's happening, what's possible, what's threatening you is a huge piece of the puzzle for liberty. But focusing on just this piece is as dumb as, building a one-legged stool. It's just not enough. The final cornerstone of liberty then is the N, and that's your network. Now, obviously, libertarians and liberty-minded people are known for their focus on the individual. And that's logical because individual action is the only type of action there is. But your community and your network can play a huge role in how free you can be. So family, friends, business partners, everyone you have a real connection with, human beings need to be around other human beings. And the benefits of surrounding yourself with a network of people who have many or most of the same beliefs and values as you, it's hard to overstate that. The sad fact is, if your network, the people closest to you, don't agree with your goals and your values, they're going to undermine you. It's not just that they're going to slow you down or not actively help you. They're actually going to actively sabotage your efforts to become more free. This is the crabs in the bucket phenomenon. As soon as other people see you start clawing your way out of that bucket, they want to pull you back down. It's just their natural instinct. But when you build a network of people who care about liberty, it's a whole different experience. Just speaking from my own experience, people who care about liberty want other people to succeed. Because let's face it, the more of us who are free, the better the chance that we can help other people become free. Because the more of us who are free, the better a chance that we have achieving a more free world. So if you happen to make $1 million, that's great. People are going to cheer for you. You get out of debt, fantastic. You break any of the chains that are holding you back, whatever kinds of chains those are, it's just more proof that we can all do the same thing. The only people who are mad at me for doing well and finding whatever level of freedom I found in my own life are the people who are either jealous because they view it as a zero-sum game. If I've done it, then I've taken their spot. Or it's the people who don't think it's fair for anyone to acquire more wealth and freedom than anyone else. And those people, whether they know it or not, are the enemies of humanity. So building the right network of supportive people is definitely a critical cornerstone of liberty. All right, so just to recap those cornerstones: security, wealth, awareness, network. You need all four to build a strong foundation. Now, one of the biggest struggles that people in the liberty movement have is knowing exactly what to do next. We read Mises and Rothbard and listen to Ron Paul and all the people in the current liberty movement talk about this philosophy, and we recognize it as both simple and elegant. The best way to maximize peace and human flourishing is to maximize individual liberty. So it's logical, it's consistent, it works every time it's tried. But we have no idea how to make it a reality in the world today. Well, look, if you want to create more freedom and liberty in the world, you can't start on a global scale. It has to start on an individual basis in your own life. So here's the thing. It's nearly impossible to fight slavery if you're still a slave, especially if all your fellow slaves don't really care about their enslavement. In that situation, your first moral obligation is to get yourself and your family out of that situation. Then, just look back at history. How many successful slave rebellions have there been? The Haitian Revolution is one. Is it the only one? Most slave rebellions end with hundreds or thousands of dead slaves, and the slaves that survived are in worse conditions. But if you look at escapes, you can find countless examples in America alone. Millions and millions of people throughout history have escaped slavery in one form or another. And former slaves played a major role in just the American Civil War. But they escaped or were freed first. So your goal, if you want to create a more free world, should be to free yourself first. Then make yourself stronger and more capable. And then from there, when you're free enough and strong enough to resist all the attacks that are inevitably going to be thrown at you, that's when you can start truly advocating for freedom for everyone else. And you'll be in a position of strength to do it from. So, of course, modern day liberty isn't quite as clear cut as you're owned by another person. So we need some metrics to figure out where we are. How strong are we as free men? So that's why I created the levels of liberty. This framework is designed to give you an idea of where you are currently and a path to follow to become more free, step by step. All right, we have to start at level 0. This is the NPC. NPC, in case you don't know, stands for non-player character. In video games, these are the characters that need to be there, but they have, pre-programmed and very limited roles in the game. So they're like the shopkeepers where your character buys supplies, or the characters in that side mission, like some damsel in distress who's been just robbed by bandits when your character, has to go hunt them down for tokens or whatever experience points. The point is, they don't really have minds of their own. In real life, these are the people who are fed their scripts by the media. It doesn't matter how ridiculous or obviously hypocritical it is from the last thing they claim to believe. Their minds are completely captured. Unfortunately, this is at least 80% of the population. So right, left, libertarian, socialist, the vast majority of people are just following a script. If you want to use the Matrix analogy, these are the blue-pilled, I support the current thing people. They can believe that riots that burn down cities are peaceful, and speech they disagree with is violence, right? They can believe that Trump is the best president of our lifetime because, he didn't start any new wars. And at the same time, they can support genocide in Yemen and giving Israel billions of dollars in weapons because, Muslim population, bad and scary. Whatever. It would be great if we could wake these people up. But for many, if not most of them, you just can't. It's a waste of time to try. It would be devastating to them psychologically to have to admit that they were, a robot following this tightly controlled program for their entire lives. They couldn't handle it. And the truth is, you and I don't need them to change. You just have to understand their programming. Because their programming, the scripts they've been fed, makes them predictable. And anybody who's predictable isn't really a threat to you. So that's the first level, or 0 level of liberty. Now let's get into the levels of liberty that actually matter. So starting with level 1, I call this the conscious cog. By that, I mean people at a level 1 are still a cog in the machine, but they're aware of what could be, essentially. So if you're at level 1, you understand what freedom could look like, even if it's only theoretical to you. In this stage, you know that most, if not all, of the systems and institutions, they're in place not to serve you, but to feed off of you. So here's the problem for this level. For whatever reason, your income, security, and network aren't quite strong enough for you to break out. Usually, this is because you have a corporate job or a government job, even worse. It has nice benefits. It has health insurance. It has some type of retirement plan that, just stick in there for the 30 years and, you'll have a semi-comfortable retirement. Now, chances are, if you're aware of what freedom could look like, this is a fairly miserable place to be. But a lot of people stay here. They think, it's riskier to quit and try to chase something new. And honestly, most people they've surrounded themselves with reinforce that idea to one level or another. Maybe not explicitly, but people in this situation know for a fact that they'd lose friends, and their family would think, they were nuts if they quit their job and tried to actually gain financial independence in their life. For people at level 1 who want to get out, there are 2 major steps. The first is to, start learning what I call a mobile money skill. That's a skill that you can take with you pretty much to any area of the country, and within a week or so, have money coming in the door. Copywriting is a great skill for this, but so is graphic design, programming, media buying, development. Almost anything technical that can be done with an internet connection is a mobile money skill. But any skill that's in demand can be a mobile money skill, like plumbers, electricians, mechanics. Most of the trades are mobile. They're needed everywhere in the country. And actually, all of those skills can be leveraged into multi-6-figure incomes if you add a couple of complementary skills to the main technical one. And we'll get into some episodes on that. The other thing folks stuck at this level should start doing immediately is upgrading their network. I've always kind of hated the slogan, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But there's no doubt that If you're at level 1 and everyone you talk to on a day-to-day basis is an NPC blue pilled or whatever you want to call them, someone at level 0 who thinks your values are dumb and destructive on top of that. Well, if that's who you're surrounded with, you're going to average out closer to a level 0 than a level 2. On the other hand, if you start connecting with people who share your beliefs in liberty, and they're also looking to become more free and independent in their own life, the expectation on you is that you're going to start leveling up. And that makes things like developing a mobile money skill and thinking about relocating and taking care of your own security normal and natural. Of course, you would do the things that lead to more freedom because everyone else around you is already on that path. It would be weird of you, actually, to keep living like an NPC if you're surrounded by people that are at level 1, 2, 3. Here's the thing. If you're already at level 1, you can never happily or fully go back to level 0. And that's not just because you'll always have that, nagging longing for freedom, which is definitely a possibility. But the real reason is, once you've figured out how many people in the ruling class are straight up lying about pretty much everything, it's impossible to trust those same people again. It's like if a spouse cheated on you, one time you might be able to work through and get past. But if you found out that your spouse was cheating on you pretty much every time they step out of the door, there's just no getting over that. You can't just forgive and forget. The relationship is dead. So even though it's painful and it's going to take work to get to the next level, it's going to be more painful for you to not try. You can lie to anybody except yourself, right? People lying to themselves is it's what leads to depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, all of that bad stuff. That's why level 1 is actually the most painful place to be. It's not somewhere you can be comfortable at just hanging out forever. It's a transitory phase, essentially. You have the desire for freedom, and you either go for it or you accept that you're always going to be a cog in the machine, and that machine hates you, and you process that however you can. The good news is if you make the decision to actually chase freedom, the freedom you want, you can get to that next level pretty quickly. So level 2 is what I call the rebel. This level is the real beginning of a free life. At this point, you have a mobile money skill that you can take to, maybe not anywhere in the world, but to a bunch of different places in the world and earn yourself a living. So that means you got your main income to be as much work from home or work from anywhere as you can. And you have at least the potential to take on more remote work as a side hustle, or you can split your time between, more than one main income source. So you're not tied down to any one place, and you're not worried about paying your essential bills. So you're beyond the level where you need to be worried about, homelessness or hunger. But to just pick up and leave, to cut everything in your current life off would still have a very noticeable impact on your standard of living. You're less worried about, speaking your mind because you have at least some part of your network that agrees and aligns with you. But at the same time, you still have enough connections and dependence on the machine that you need to exercise some caution. I call it the rebel phase because you're capable of fighting back, but you're still behind enemy lines. So this is the phase where you really have to start taking your online security and privacy more seriously. I know this might sound melodramatic, but at this level, you don't exactly have a target painted on your back by the machine, but you're definitely in the category of people that they'd like to shut up and sit down. So backing up your digital data, becoming less dependent on, easily manipulated and controlled tools like the main social media and email platforms, and generally being more digitally resilient becomes more important at this phase. Luckily, at this level, you have a few liberty-oriented friends who have your back. You've built out that network a little bit. And if you're on the right track, it's just a matter of time until you get to level 3. And that's what I call the liberated. This is the first true taste of what it feels like to be disconnected from the machine. At this level, you have a strong network of liberty-minded friends and connections and business partners. That may only be 3 or 4 or 5 people, but they're the exact right people. And you can get introduced to someone who can help you in any situation, really, that you need. So on the security front here, at level 3, you're pretty well taken care of. You have basic self-defense and home protection locked down, and you're very comfortable becoming anonymous online when you want to be. And then having your visible online identity fairly well under control as well. So for wealth, your income is fully mobile. You have more than one secure source of money coming in, and you have enough saved that you could probably last 6, 12, 18 months if you suddenly lost all of your income. On top of that, the wealth you do have is secure and diversified. So as far as the awareness, you have a solid grasp of history, philosophy, current events, and you have an eye on the government and the ruling class actions. So you can preemptively avoid most of the consequences of their policies and actions. So at this level, you're not worried about getting fired or canceled because you make enough money to just pick up and leave if things get untenable. So from there, there's only one more level to go. And that is level 4, which is what I call the sovereign. So short of getting society to that mythical utopia of Ancapistan, this is as free as you can get in this world. At this level, you're fully financially and location independent. That means if you never earned another dollar in your life, it wouldn't matter to you. You work because it gives you purpose and meaning, not because you need to keep earning money to, live or to maintain your lifestyle. So your personal and digital security at this level are pretty well locked down, barring some extraordinary circumstance. You have a large network of rebels and liberated and some other folks at the sovereign level who have your back no matter what. You're also as close as possible to being ungovernable, unbreakable, uncancelable. So that's the level all of us want to be at, I think. But honestly, it doesn't even matter if you get there or not. I'm certainly not at that level, although that is what I'm striving for. You can be pretty damn free at level 2 or 3. I included 4 because I want you to realize that it is an option. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it's an option. The important thing to do is to figure out where you are right now. If you're still watching this, you're probably at level 1 or 2. There are a few people at level 3 probably, but wherever you are, it's possible to move up. And remember, you don't have to eat the whole elephant at once. You become more free one step at a time. So moving forward, with every episode, I'm going to bring you a guest or some of my own views to help you work on one of those 4 cornerstones of liberty. That's security, wealth, awareness, and of course, your network. The idea is to help you make progress towards that next level of liberty. Now, if you want to get the most out of this podcast, the first thing you should do is go subscribe to my email list. Look, I can't guarantee that any of these podcasting platforms or YouTube are going to keep me around forever. I don't think I'm doing anything that will get me kicked off, but I'm also not the type of person who can really bite my tongue if I have something to say. And, screw it. I'm at the level where I don't really need to bite my tongue. So if for whatever reason I do get the boot, I can always keep in touch with you through email. Just go to henrybing.co/liberty. When you opt in on that page, you'll get a transcript of this podcast. So you can go back and look at the 4 cornerstones and the different levels of liberty. And, I love hearing your feedback. So if you have any thoughts, good or bad, on the new podcast name or the new direction I'm going, just email me at henry@henrybingaman.com. All right. That's all I got for this week. I'll see you back here next week.